Welcome back. In this session, we are going to create a new dedicated SQL pool for our course. As with everything we've seen so far, we can either create the dedicated SQL pool from the Synapse workspace or from Synapse Studio. I'll show you both of them. So if you want to create it from the Synapse workspace, you click on the plus new dedicated SQL pool button here, and you go through this wizard to create the dedicated SQL pool. If you want to do it from Synapse Studio, which is what I prefer doing, normally you come over to the Manage Hub and then click on SQL Pools and click on New, and you get the same wizard and you just complete the details to create the dedicated SQL pool. So let's go through this one. And the first thing is we want to give it a name. I'm going to call this one as the NYC Taxi Database, which is DWH. And the next thing is we need to choose the performance level. We went through the performance levels in the last session. As you can see, 1000 data warehouse units is the default one here. And that gives us 2 compute nodes, and that's going to cost us this much amount. That's quite a lot of money, and we don't need to have that much power for our costs, so we can go all the way down to 100 data warehouse units. As you know, that is a portion of 1 compute node, and they get 60 gigabytes of memory, which is quite a lot for what we want to do. And that's going to cost me 138 rupees per hour. So that's good enough for me. But one thing you need to remember is dedicated SQL pool once provisioned, unless you go and manually pause it, it's going to be up and running and you're going to be charged that amount, and that's going to add up over time, which is quite a lot of money. So you want to remember to turn it off as soon as you've finished your work. So I'll show you how to do that in a bit as well. So let's click through to additional settings. And here actually we are going to create a blank SQL pool. If we had some data, we can restart it from backup, and you can change the collation here if you wanted to, but I'm going to leave the default here. That's good enough for what we're doing. Click through tags and then click on Review plus Create. And that's given us the same details back here, and that looks okay. So I'm going to just click Create, and that will normally take between 5 to 8 minutes. So let's wait for this to be provisioned, and then we'll come back to the session again. Okay. As you can see now, the dedicated SQL pool has been provisioned and it's online, and it's available for us to use when it's online. It means 2 things. 1, it's been deployed, it's available for us to use. And 2, you are being charged at this point in time for this service. So that's the main difference between the serverless SQL pool, which you're seeing, which is the built-in pool, and the dedicated SQL pool, the serverless pool. Even though the status is online, you're not being charged at all. Actually, you're charged only when you're processing any data. So it's only charging for data processed as opposed to being available. But the dedicated SQL pool is a dedicated resource. What that means is you're going to be charged while that's online. So if you don't want to have it, you will have to pause it. So if you hover over the dedicated SQL pool name, you will see a button here, which is a pause button. I'll do that when I come to the end of this session. But at the moment, let's go through the others. The next one, you've got a scale, and you've got the 3 dots there that gives you the same options as well. So you've got the power scale, and then you can assign tags, and you can delete the dedicated SQL pool as well if you don't want it. So let's click on Scale. So when scaling, you can go from the 100 data warehouse units. That's what we got here, all the way up to the 30,000 data warehouse units. I don't have enough quota to be able to go to the 30,000 data warehouse units. That's why I've got some error messages here. But that's what you do actually. So I think I can go up to about 3,000 data warehouse units, and anything above that. I'd have to request Microsoft to allocate additional quota for me. One thing you want to remember is that when you're scaling and click Apply, it's going to release all the connections. So if you have any queries running or any applications running, they're all going to be terminated, and then it shuts down. The dedicated SQL pool allocates the new number of compute that's required, and then it'll bring up the service for you. So you have to assume that time as a downtime. So that is an important thing to remember. So you don't want to be doing that while online hours, assuming it's just going to add additional costs to the service while it's up and running. That's not the case. It's going to bring down the service and then bring it back up again. Let me cancel this because we don't want to scale up again, and let's click on Pause. So it's going to tell us that actually there are no active user queries. Would you like to continue on post the dedicated SQL pool? If there are any active queries, you can still do that, but it's just asking for a confirmation. But when you pause the service, it's going to kill all of those connections. So remember that you're going to be terminating connections which are already active. So let me click on pause so that I'm not going to be charged while that's not in use. So as you can see here, actually, the service is now paused. It took about a minute to pause the service. And when you want to restart it, you come over here and then you can click on the play button here. Or you can just click on resume button here and resume the service. It'll take a couple of minutes for that as well, actually. And that's the end of this session. In the next session, we'll talk about a scenario where we will use the dedicated SQL pool within our project and we'll start building the tables. I will see you then.